The sigil reacts. The sky was quiet. Too quiet. But to those attuned to the metaphysical pulse, the new language that hung in the air since Velzion's appearance, it was as if the world was now breathing in a different rhythm. And then it flinched. It happened at the edge of the Eastern Corridor, where two minor nations, both historically neutral, had a long-standing border dispute over a mana spring. Tensions were always high there. But today, one arrow flew too far. Just one. No casualties. No declarations of war. But it was enough. At that precise moment, the sigil in the sky pulsed, its celestial rings flashing red for the first time. Only high-level beings could perceive it. Rimuru, Raphael, Veldora, Guy Crimson. And when they did, they all felt the same thing. Something has changed. Inside the Nexus core, Raphael ran its analysis. Observation grid response, level 2 escalation, triggered by localized hostile intent. Rimuru narrowed his eyes. It's reacting to behavior? Affirmative. Sigil adjusts frequency in response to aggressive magical actions across the continent. Even Veldora looked uncomfortable. So, we're inside a moral simulation? Incorrect, Raphael corrected. There is no morality, only stability metrics. Velzion is not judging who is right, only what will collapse. And that was worse, because now, any conflict, even small, could feed a narrative in a Velzion's ever-turning mechanism. And the more instability it detected, the more correction it might eventually unleash. Rimuru called an emergency session with his inner circle. On the map, Raphael overlaid recent mana events with sigil pulses. They aligned perfectly. A black market skirmish in Sarion Minor Flicker. A broken magical pact between two merchant cities' brief spike. The border clash, a full red pulse. Each event had fed into the sigil. He's not testing us randomly, Rimuru realized. He's watching how we handle what we already fail at. So I asked the natural question. Can we suppress every conflict on the continent? Rimuru didn't answer at first, because the truth was no. Even a god couldn't fix that in time. But maybe, what if we influence the reaction, not the event? Raphael confirmed that passive intent and de-escalation decisions were being recorded just as strongly as the initial acts. That was it. That was the key. It wasn't about preventing all chaos. It was about responding in a way that Velzion's system saw as sustainable. And so, for the first time, Rimuru saw the sigil not as a threat, but as a lens, an algorithmic judgment field, one that turned emotion into pattern, and action into data. And now, the world was part of the equation. Ramiris and the Labyrinth's awakening. Deep beneath Tempest, in the heart of the Labyrinth, something ancient had begun to breathe. But it wasn't alive. Not in the way people understand life. It was the structure itself. Walls, halls, runes, spaces that had started to move. And Ramiris, guardian and creator, didn't like surprises in her own house. At first, it seemed harmless. A few floors rearranged themselves. Some traps rewrote their runic sequences. Nothing dangerous, just different. But then glyphs appeared on level 100, sigils she had never carved, patterns no spell should naturally form. They glowed faintly with a silver light. They pulsed in rhythm. And worst of all, they matched the outer layers of Velzion's sigil in the sky. Ramiris called Rimuru in a panic. Hey, someone's messing with my labyrinth. And it's not me. When Rimuru and Raphael arrived, the glyphs were still glowing. Raphael scanned them immediately. Pattern correlation, 97.2% match with Velzion's dimensional structure. Conclusion, reactive mimicry. Ramiris blinked. What does that mean? The labyrinth is not being invaded. It is synchronizing. That stopped everyone. The labyrinth, designed as a chaotic, unpredictable training and defense mechanism, was reacting to Velzion's awakening not with resistance, but with coherence. It was adapting itself, shifting floors into cyclical flow, aligning pathways with perfect geometrical symmetry, even stabilizing once chaotic magical densities. Ramiris, flustered, threw her hands in the air. I didn't tell it to do that. It's never acted this smart before. Raphael offered a theory. Long ago, Velzion may have interacted with proto-versions of world constructs like the Labyrinth, complex magical zones designed not for battle, but for containment or simulation. In other words, the Labyrinth may share architectural DNA with Velzion's original seal. The implications were massive. If the Labyrinth could mimic Velzion's logic, then perhaps it could be used to understand or even anticipate how he sees the world. Maybe even predict his next move. But also meant something else. If it keeps adapting, Rimuru said slowly, what happens when the Labyrinth becomes too aligned with him? Ramiris went pale. You think it'll stop being mine and become his? It's possible, Raphael answered, unless we intervene. From that moment on, the Labyrinth became a living barometer. Each pulse from Velzion's sigil above created a subtle response in its geometry below. And Rimuru, watching both systems now in motion, whispered, even our strongest fortress is part of the test. Rimuru's first move, prevent the war. The sigil in the sky had spoken, not in words, but in pulses. And Rimuru understood. This wasn't a waiting game anymore. The test had started. The world was reacting like it always did, fragments breaking, egos clashing, alliances fraying. But this time, every misstep didn't just risk war. It risked erasure. News came fast. The skirmish between two minor nations, triggered by a border incident over a mana spring, was escalating. Neither side wanted war, but neither would back down without losing face. And the sigil? It pulsed again, a crimson flicker, not loud, but felt. It's responding to tension, not just conflict, Rimuru realized. He couldn't let this become another data point. He acted. Rimuru dispatched Soai with a specialized envoy team, magically masked, fast, and empowered by Raphael's tactical support system. Their goal: reach both nations before the military machines rolled. At the same time, Raphael extended observer wards over the region, recording Velzion's pulse timings, mana fluctuations, and emotional field density from the local population. Yes, even emotion was being weighed now. But Rimuru wasn't done. From Tempest's central tower, he activated a powerful magical broadcast. Not to threaten, not to beg, to steady. A calm, confident voice filled the skies of several nations. This world is being watched, not by demons or kings, but by something greater. And if we can't hold our peace, then we may lose the right to keep anything else. That speech reached capitals, guild halls, and even wandering adventurers. Some dismissed it as poetic. Others paused. But in the two warring nations, the kings listened. Soai arrived just as troops began lining up for engagement. His words, backed by Rimuru's message and undeniable magical authority, didn't command obedience. They convinced. No war began. A truce was signed, and Raphael observed something vital. The sigil did not react negatively. No red pulse, but no green either. Rimuru blinked. So that wasn't a pass. Correct. The system registered the de-escalation, but flagged the cause as reactionary rather than preventive. Even that mattered. The test wasn't about solving problems. It was about creating order before chaos arrives. And that meant Rimuru couldn't just play defense. He would need to reshape the very behavior of the world around him. Not tomorrow. Not after another crisis. Now, because next time, Velzion might not be content to observe. Guy Crimson intervenes. In a palace carved from frozen obsidian, where time did not move unless he willed it, Guy Crimson watched the rotating sigil in the sky. He didn't fear it. He understood it. Because Guy, unlike most, had seen systems like this before, during the fall of the previous era. He recognized the pattern, the quiet logic, the judgment without rage. Velzion isn't back to fight. He's back to categorize. So he moved, but not in force. He sent a single message, layered through magical interference fields, threaded with untraceable signature pulses. It reached only one person, Rimuru Tempest. I'm not here to play nice, the message began. But if we keep acting like demon lords, This thing will treat us as variables to delete. Rimuru read it with growing weight. Then the transmission changed, from message to holographic presence. Guy stood in full crimson regalia, his eyes aglow, arms crossed. Listen carefully. One of us is already trying to manipulate the test. Stirring chaos. Calculated disorder. Rimuru asked the obvious. Yūki. Guy shook his head. Not human. Not imperial. Demon. A lesser demon lord, ambitious, unstable, had begun inciting skirmishes along the Beast Kingdom's fringe territories. Not for war, but for measurable instability. Guy had detected the spike. So had the sigil. If left unchecked, it could become a pattern, a behavior the system might interpret as core-level instability among demon lords. And if that happens, it won't delete one of us. It will flag the entire category, and we're all gone. So Guy offered a proposal. Non-alliance. A containment protocol. We declare a temporary non-aggression pact. No demon lord attacks another. No political manipulation. No magical theater. We don't have to like each other. But we have to stop feeding this god reasons to pull the plug. Rimuru agreed instantly. Not because he feared Velzion more than the demon lords, but because he feared losing the chance to change what came next. They sealed the pact via high-grade contract magic, only 3 lines long. No aggression, no provocation. Any violator becomes the enemy of all. Guy smiled faintly at the end of the call. Funny, huh? Took a machine god to make us act like adults. Rimuru just nodded. For now, because he knew, if even one of them cracked the rules, the test wouldn't end with a warning. It would end with deletion. Yuki's trap springs. While demon lords signed pacts and Rimuru escalated the world one battle at a time, Yūki Kagurazuka set his play in motion. He didn't need armies. He didn't need monsters. He only needed one thing. Data. His trap was simple conceptually. Using the Empire's ancient relics, Yūki and his Magitech Resonance Division created a localized mana implosion, a subtle manipulation of ley line pressure that looked, from the outside, like a natural mana storm. But in reality, it was a signal spike meant to trigger Velzion's sigil. It worked. Within seconds of detonation, miles outside Tempest's outer district, the sky shivered. The sigil pulsed red. Deeper, sharper, longer. Back in Tempest, Raphael registered first. Warning, Velzion's construct interpreting event as systemic instability. Risk factor, high. The core team assembled in under a minute. Rimuru clenched his jaw. But it wasn't us. Confirmed, Raphael replied. Energy signature foreign. Likely simulated threat pattern. In short, Diablo added, his voice dark, someone planted false data, and now we're being blamed for the result. And that was the brilliance of Yuki's trap. It wasn't violent. It wasn't even lethal. It was perceptual. To Velzion's system, the event appeared to come from Tempest's domain. And perception, in a divine judgment framework, was truth. Rimuru stood still for a moment, then gave an order. Don't retaliate. Not yet. If we hit back, we validate the instability. Let's trace it quietly and recode the data trail. Raphael deployed reverse magic filters, complex illusionary rewrite spells that would redirect mana residue signatures and restore baseline reading alignment. It would take time. It might not work, but it was the only shot, because if Velzion thought Tempest was the core of the storm, there wouldn't be a second test. There'd be a judgment. Yūki, watching from distance, smiled as the sigil's pulse dimmed. That's right. Dance carefully, Rimuru. Let me write the narrative so the god sees only what I want him to see.